Bonjour, everybody. Welcome to one of our 4 live lunch and learn presented as part of the EMSB Parent Con 2023. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Daniel Totone, and I am a parent volunteer on the English Montreal School Board Parents Committee. We are all here live in numerous locations, but I would like to take this time to recognize that the English Montreal School Board is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. We are grateful to live, learn, and work in Tiohtià:ke, which has long been a site of meeting and exchange for many First Nations and is currently home to a diverse group of Indigenous and other peoples. It is important that we acknowledge the historic and ongoing role of education institutions in perpetuating injustices against the Indigenous communities. We are committed to educating staff, students, and parents about the true history and current realities of Indigenous peoples and what we now call Canada. Celebrating the cultures, contributions, and knowledge of the many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, listening to and amplifying Indigenous voices, and partnering with local Indigenous communities. And partnering with local Indigenous community members. We offer this acknowledgement as a first step and public commitment to our ongoing process toward reconciliation and justice for Indigenous peoples and communities. For those of you who have never attended this event before, it is organized by the English Montreal School Board Parents Committee. This committee is a government-mandated body that represents all EMSB parents. We inform the EMSB parents' needs. We inform the EMSB of parents' needs, advise the EMSB on related issues, and our members represent parents on EMSB committees and at the Council of Commissioners. We also promote and encourage different ways for parents and guardians to connect with each other. Our annual events like this, Lunch and Learn, are just one of the ways that we try to create a community. The purpose of this event is to provide you with some valuable information, tips, and strategies to help you navigate the joys and challenges of parenting. We believe that every parent deserves access to the tools and resources they need to succeed in the role. We hope that you enjoy this opportunity to learn from experts and gain valuable information to help your child thrive. Just share. So before we get to our main programming, we have some small details that we'd like to relay. There are 2 ways that you can access this talk. We've provided guests with a Zoom link, and we are live streaming on the EMSB Parents Committee YouTube page. There will be a Q&A after the main presentation, and we invite you to enter your questions into the chat box or comment field. We will then try to do our best to get to all the questions. Now on to our main event. The workshop entitled Parenting Your Child and Adolescent with Screen Addiction aims at making parents and guardians more tech-wise, gain tips to create healthy screen balance, and to help protect the young people in your lives from the allure of screen addiction. Our speaker, Bill Young, is a drama therapist originally from Edmonton, Alberta. He holds a Master's of Arts from Concordia University and a Bachelor's of Education from the University of Alberta. He has worked clinically for the West Montreal Readaptation Center, Centre d'éducation des adultes Outremont, Centre, and Center of Arts in Human Development, the CAHD. Native Montreal, and is currently a youth counselor for Chabad with the English Montreal School Board. Bill is interested in how to create elements such as play, storytelling, and embodiment, and how it can help clients imagine and take on new roles, such as a sober self, and encounter it in an organic, patient, and playful manner. Bill, the mic is yours.
Great. Thanks, Daniel, for that introduction. And thank you, WAL EMSB Parent Committee, for inviting me. I realized it's been a whole week of a lot of work, and it looks amazing, the topics and the people that you invited. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen here, and Today, we're going to be talking a bit about parenting our kids and how we may address screen addiction related issues in our household. Typically, I would have done this with Linda Aber. She's a parent coach on our staff, but unfortunately, she has for health reasons, she can't make it today. So I'll be doing it by myself. So I guess, Daniel, you're going to probably, if there are any questions, you'll probably read them and then
Absolutely, yeah. We'll
you
get
can
to
keep
that
track.
too.
So I'll just go through the slides and then feel free to send the questions as you go along and I'll try to answer them the best I can.
Sounds good.
So a little bit about who we are. We are a addiction outpatient center that works in Côte-des-Neiges. We're right next to the hospital, and we support families and individuals around anything that relates to addiction or dependence. So often when we think about addiction, it is framed in terms of substances, alcohol or drugs, but of course there's a whole realm there in terms of process addictions. And of course, because you're all here around screen addictions, that is, an example of a process one. Most of our services are at no cost for clients and there's no wait list. So if this is a service that, whether it is screen addiction or alcohol or drugs, it is a service that's available for you, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So in addition to this, actually, I hope I have the right slide actually. Oh yeah, I do. So in addition to, the work around addiction, one of the things that we've been doing for the past 3 years has been running the screen addiction family programs, where we work with both parents and kids around creating more balanced screen use and addressing screen addiction in their families. So we're going to have one in the fall of 2023, so this year. There are currently some spaces available. So if this is a program that you think your family could use, please email me or call me, and I could put you on the list for this program. So typically it's a 7-week program and it happens every Tuesday from 7 to 8:30 at night. And it says 10 to 14, but it's actually 12 to 16 here. So there's a bit of a typo there. A little bit about, the people that will be doing that. So Linda is our parent coach. She does a lot of work with Nurtured Heart. And she does a lot of work around learning disabilities as well. So that's a huge gift that we have to be able to have her on our team. And of course, this is me. I am the youth coordinator at Chabad Lifeline. I work with people between the ages of 5 to 25 around various kinds of issues around dependence and addiction. I'm a former school teacher, like Daniel said, from Edmonton, and now I work here at Chabad Lifeline. So what are we going to talk about? So I'm going to start with a bit of context. We're going to talk a bit about, what does, at least what I have access to in terms of brain science, what's going on inside of our adolescent kids' brains? What are the things that make screens so addictive? And then how do we figure out how severe the issue might be? And then we'll talk a bit about some tools for what we can do as parents to create more balanced screen use in our households. I'm not going to do that because there's not everyone here. So the first thing I'll say is that, typically I like to say that, at least at the beginning, to remind myself that technology and screens is designed to help improve and make our lives easier, right? That is intrinsically the purpose of technology. There are many things that it can do, for example, social networks allow us to build wider circles, keep in touch. It gives us access to information that we might never have done. We're doing this on technology, on Zoom. So the conversation, when we're talking about screen addiction and supporting families to have more balanced use, isn't how do we abstain from technology and screens, but really more about how can we be more intentional with the time we spend with technology, right? So it's one thing to be intentional about being on your computer and doing your work, and it's another thing to have lost your mind and lost all these hours because you're playing a game or you're on social media. So what we're working towards here is how can we be more intentional? And sometimes that may mean taking a break from it, but that's the ultimate goal in our mind. So context. As I go along, I'll introduce some books so that, if I'm going to kind of rip through some information because, my time is pretty limited. So if you want to learn more about the things that I'm talking about, look at these books. I strongly recommend them. The first one is Dan Siegel's book called Brainstorm, which really talks about the neuroscience about adolescence and what he believes, as a brain scientist, is going on inside of adolescents' brains. So for him, in his book, he defines adolescence starting from the ages of 12 and kind of ending at age 24. But I think as the research kind of updates itself, I think the brain actually develops further along after 24. So essentially, one big characteristic, to very overly simplify what's going on, is at age 12, the brain goes through this thing called synaptic pruning, right? So in essence, if you look at the brain over here, where there's a lot of synapses connecting here, when a child is born and a child gets to adolescence, their synapses are connecting at a very rapid rate. This is a period in time where the brain is probably one of the most plastic it can be, which means that they're able to adapt, learn as new things. So this is a period of time where, language skills can be developed a lot easier, new skills like playing an instrument and so on. But as they get to adolescence, the brain goes through a thing called synaptic pruning, which, it's kind of like the metaphor to describe, when you are pruning a bush and there's a big bush and you're kind of cutting it away so that it kind of fits the mold that it needs to be. Our brains are kind of doing that, right? So in essence, the parts of our brains that are constantly being used will strengthen, and the parts of the brain that aren't will kind of be pruned away, right? And that means a bunch of things. The first thing is that this is a period of time where adolescents would tend to start to figure out what am I interested in? Who am I? Who do I want to associate with? This is also a period of time where there's an increased dopamine reward drive, right? So that means that adolescents are more prone to taking riskier behaviors where they may consider the reasons to do something rather than not, and higher compulsion, right? So if we look at it in a larger kind of evolutionary context, this is a period of time, if you picture, like us, perhaps our ancestors before we were living in like cities and stuff, where there's a period of time where the kids tend to find their own homes. They might move out, they might develop their own families and so on. And the brain has kind of developed to adjust to that sort of context there. So, when we talk about peer orientation, this could be a period of time where our kids may be more interested in what our peers are thinking than what their parents may be, right? And if we look at it in an evolutionary sense, well, if someone is starting to move out it is within their interest to know what their peers want and to want their peers to get along, because it's probably not a very safe place if you're all alone. So that's, that's what's happening inside the brain. And I think it's important to note that when I talk a bit about what is it about the sort of screen, the technology that makes it so addictive. So one of the reasons why I bring this up in terms of, what makes screens so addictive is sometimes and oftentimes I will often hear either clients or parents talk about addiction in a bit of a moralistic way, in that, if he would just be more motivated, or if he wasn't so entitled or whatnot, this wouldn't be an issue. And the reality is that, I mean, it's hard to kind of give a generalized statement about it, but there are a lot of things at play here in terms of what makes screens so addictive. And so one of the reasons I present this is so that we have a bit more context as to why that's happening. So the research that that I'll be presenting is actually written by this psychologist from Australia called Brad Marshall, which Linda introduced us to. And he writes this book here called The Tech Diet for Your Child and Teen. And I highly recommend this book as well. It's something for you to read to understand more of this. And he provides some pretty user-friendly tools for families as well in here. So in essence, there are actually 7 things that make screens addictive. And then we've broken it down into 2 things. The first one is video games, and the second one is social media. So first one is, what makes video games so addictive? Well, one of the things that Brad talks about is the idea of gamification. In essence, gamification is the study of how do you take regular things and make it engaging. How do you gamify something? Like, for example, if you're like a teacher and you've got a bunch of kids and you want them to line up, you might say something like, whoever lines up first wins, right? So essentially you just gamified lining up. And what he quoted here is this one particular article written in 1996 by Bartle. And Bartle claims that there's four types of players. And most video games will utilize all 4, will create scenarios where all 4 of these things are met, right? And so as I'm talking about these 4 types of players, I invite you parents, as you're listening, to see, hey, which type am I more inclined to? Am I inclined to one, or am I inclined to all of these? Just so you can get a sense. So what he says, there's 4: the socializer, the killer, the explorer, and the achiever. So the first one is an achiever. So these are players that are motivated by being the best, right? So when we look at video games, often there's a scoreboard at the very end of a game. And so typically someone who is purely achiever is motivated by being the person with the top score, right? And many video games, if not all of them, have something like this. An explorer is motivated by discovering things, right? So many games involve maps and tasks to do, right? Sort of like a scavenger hunt. The third one is the socializer. So these players are more oriented towards having opportunities to interact with other people and interact with other players. And so they're more engaged in opportunities to talk with other players and work together. And the last one are killers, right? So these players are more oriented towards, well, ultimately kind of beating out the other players, right? So there are a lot of games that involve that. And the reality is, before video games, a lot of these things also existed, right? So, I was doing a presentation at a school, and what's, one asked, like, what is an example of, something that is like a clear killer type game that we do. So like if you play dodgeball, or if you play tag, these players are typically more motivated to kind of get the dodgeball and hit everyone or tag everyone out in the game. So there are four types of players that typically video games have, and most video games will have that, right? So that's one thing that creates sort of the addiction. The next one is flow, right? So flow is based on the idea of being so encompassed in something that you lose track of time, right? This happens in a lot of things that we do. Like, for example, sometimes I play the piano, and I get so into learning a song that I kind of lose track of how much time I spent trying to learn that song. So, there are many other ways that you could say the flow, like the zone is another way of saying that. And essentially flow is, getting to a place where you're stimulated enough that you're not bored, but not so stimulated that you get frustrated or you feel anxious, right? So that sort of happy place here is where the flow happens. And games and social media are designed to have enough stimulus to get people to want to spend more time on it, right? And one of the things to think about in terms of, how do you use flow to your advantage is to think in terms of your own household and your relationship to your kids. Aside from gaming, are there things that you guys might typically do in your house that might elicit this flow state? And here are just a couple pictures of things that I typically might do that evoke flow, right? So whether it's Lego or playing basketball or learning an instrument, or if you're inclined to paint, something like that. Another sort of psychological process is a thing called near miss. So near miss is just the idea that you're almost always there, but you never quite get there. So it makes you want to stay on, right? It's this idea where you're almost there. And yeah, it borrows from the psychological processes of gambling, right? Of slot machines. This is an example of The Simpsons, where you're almost there, and it makes you want to put another sort of bet in to get another kind of chance to get it finally. So those are a couple there in terms of video games, but in social media, there's a whole schwackload more here. The first one is the idea of the psychological process of like hyper-personal effect. So this refers to the idea that comments made online may have more emotional power or pull than made in person, right? Often the way, even now as I communicate on Zoom and I'm looking at a bunch of names and not people, it kind of like in my head, I have no idea what's going on. And so there's a level of anxiety that I might have because I have no idea what you guys are doing, or you could all be making a face at me or something like that. So a lot of how we communicate in regular life gets missed when we're interacting online, right? Something as simple as like seeing what the person's legs are doing, or something like pheromones, is missing when we're communicating online. And therefore, it has a bigger impact on us when we receive information that is out of context, for example. Another thing that happens is this thing called the Zeigarnik effect. It's something that was developed by a psychologist named Zeigarnik. And basically what it suggests is that as human beings, we seek a logical and satisfying conclusion to a social interaction we have. So if I wave to somebody and I say hi to them, and they don't do anything back, that would make me feel quite awkward, right? Or I would feel a bit weird about that. And so the same thing applies here in terms of how we interact online, because that happens all the time, right? So for example, someone may say nice, and then you may say nice or hey, and you see that they've read it, but they don't respond, right? That would make me want to look and wonder when they're going to respond to me. Another sort of process is called the social comparison theory. So one of the theories is that we often compare ourselves, worth and self-esteem in relationship to others, right? So as much as we like to think we don't care about what other people think, it can be a different ballgame online. So, there's a saying, sometimes we talk about self-esteem as if the way we esteem ourselves is just from ourselves, but often, maybe a more accurate way is talking about social esteem. So what we think about ourselves typically actually comes from the responses of other people. If we think well about ourselves, it typically comes from maybe our parents or our teachers or our friends who give us that message. And if not, maybe vice versa, right? So the example that he gave, and I kind of picked my own example here. So here's a picture of my cousin and my niece. And here's a picture of me in Iceland. And the context is that, it looks like a nice picture now, but what you don't see here was that before we took this picture, there was a ton of people that was around, and we've cropped everyone out of it, right? So the context isn't there. Or the picture before, Brad talked sorry, the picture before, it looked like a really nice picture between a mom and a daughter, but before that, it was pandemonium in terms of the daughter being really upset and having a huge fit, and it took like maybe a 45 to an hour for the daughter to calm down before we could take that nice photo again, right? So what we see online is typically not actually an accurate portrayal of what's going on. And the last one is dopamine, right? Which is probably the most common thing we hear about why screens are so addictive. And dopamine it's a hormone that's released when your brain is expecting a reward. And there are many things that give us dopamine in life, but one of the interesting facts about notifications is that if you ever go online and you go on your phone and you see the color of notifications, it's typically red. And something that was found was that red actually evokes dopamine in our brains. And so it's not a coincidence that when our social medias provide us notifications, it's in red, and our thumbs are drawn towards looking at it. And so one of the questions to think as well is, what are some other things that happen in your household that might provide dopamine as well, right? Any questions, Danielle, that I don't see anything in my chat, but I'm just checking in with you.
Yeah, well, on both the YouTube and Zoom chat, we are question free at the moment.
Okay, I'll keep going then. Um, and when we look at, you know, the context of it, at the end of the day, you know, video games and social media is an industry, right? And it's working towards trying to get as much money as possible. And if we look at the history of video games, we have the first game being Pong, right, which was created in 1972, which was something that was not very sort of immersive, right? You had to go to the arcade, put your quarter in, and then you got to play. Whereas now, most games, I think this is from 2020, are mobile, right? And so it's incredibly immersive, as everyone, you know, most people in our society today typically would have a mobile device. And you know, I guess one of the concerning things about all of this is that our governments are kind of playing catch up in terms of regulations to protect our kids around the issues of screens. And you know, there's a famous kind of moment, I think last year, when the Facebook whistleblower came out and talked about the very concerning things that social media was doing, and the way it impacts young people in our society. Okay, so here are some tools I think that actually Lyndon and I think are helpful to know. The first one is, how do we know, right? Typically, whenever we use, you know, whether it is drugs or screens, it's often in the spectrum, right? So not everybody who plays video games is in the chaotic realm or in the addictive realm or has a screen addiction disorder. And so how do we figure that out? So what Brad kind of recommends here is looking at the 5 domains. The first one is health, looking at are they taking care of themselves? Are they meeting their health needs? Are they bathing? Are they eating? Are they going to the bathroom? Are they sleeping? The emotional. So what are they feeling? Are there is their mood being affected? Are there sort of ups and downs in terms of their emotions? And we look at social. So are they more isolated? Are most of their sort of social interactions online exclusively? Have they become less social in real life? Behavioral. So do you notice changes in behavior? Things that you notice your kids doing a lot more of? Do you notice that they're doing a lot less of it? Do you notice that there's more conflicts maybe in the house? Do you notice perhaps they're lying a bit more? And so on. And then the last one is the educational aspect. So are your kids going to school? Are they going to school on time? Are they always late? Are they completing their assignments? Have their attitudes about school shifted, right? Do they feel like there's purpose to going to school, or it's shifted to, well, I think school there's really no point. So these 5 domains can be a way for us to figure out, you know, where our kids might be in terms of spectrum of how severe their screen dependency is. So this one is one of Linda's slides. And so she recommends 4 things in terms of enhancing family screen balance time. The first one is consider parental control filters, right? So one of the things is like, as parents, we have control over hopefully some control over what content our kids are exposed to. And there are filters that exist either on the phone or on your TV or your computer in terms of what you're able to access. Reframing Wi-Fi as a reward and not a right. So one of the things that Brad talks about is that typically the more addictive parts of screens involves the internet. And so framing the Wi-Fi as a reward helps kind of address that sort of piece there. And that you guys, that parents can take control of the Wi-Fi, right? So deciding and talking to your kids about what time you may want to turn off the Wi-Fi in the house can be one strategy to support that. And then I guess one of the more biggest one is to avoid guerrilla warfare, right? So there may be a time where you become fed up with how much time your kids has spent on their PlayStation, and you go and grab their controller, and of course that creates can create, I guess, bigger explosion or a conflict, and I guess in our experience typically becomes a sort of barrier in terms of connection and talking about the issue. So I see a question here. Very difficult to manage when homework and school related things also require Wi-Fi and screens. How to manage and discern the time without policing your young teen? That's a great question, and I think as we go along, I hope the tool that we'll introduce later might answer your question there. So another book that we recommend here is this one called The Tech Solution. It's written by Shimi Kang, and she is a psychiatrist that works around screen addiction, and she provides us this really incredible metaphor about thinking about your tech use like a diet, right? So we typically live in a world, I think, like the previous comment there, where it's very difficult, if not impossible, to not have screens in our lives. And so, you know, similarly to food, we can't not eat either. So what we can do is be more intentional about it, right? So she categorizes our tech use in 3 different things. First one is healthy tech. So these are the things that promote what she thinks promote self-care, connection, and creation. The second one being toxic tech, right? So things that create a lot of issues, addiction-related issue, fear of missing out, bullying, hidden stress. And then the one that's in between, which she calls junk tech, right? So these are the things that may not cause too many problems, but if you did too much of it, it would, right? So like, for example, I personally really like eating sweet chili heat Doritos, but if I could have it once in a while, but if I have it too much, there's going to be problems, right? So so one of the exercises that we typically would invite our participants to do, and something that we encourage you guys to do, is to maybe look at the different types of tech that your family may use, and then start to categorize them in terms of healthy tech, junk tech, and toxic tech. And have a conversation about it. So another tool, this one's back to Brad. He talks about creating, sorry, I keep flipping back and forth, creating a sort of tech schedule in the house. So how can I build structure in life? Well, he suggests that you kind of talk with your kid to set up a schedule that you can use that will be followed. And the way he suggests that you do it is start with what time bed is, and then what time we want to wake up. And then you schedule the school time. And then other activities. So if there's extracurricular, making sure that you guys can eat, so scheduling that time. And then with that time, how much time do you think homework and studying would take? And then how much time would it take to, do self-care, hygiene, wind down before bed? And then the rest of the time you can designate as leisure time, so free time that you could be used for tech. And it may look something like this.
Oh, can you go back for a second?
Yeah, you want to look at the nice
Yeah, I think
area.
that's a screenshot worthy.
Okay.
No, the schedule, the schedule.
Oh yeah, here you go. Let me know when.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Here's a nice picture of a birdhouse. So there may be a time where you know, what's happening at home or where your child is at is perhaps you may need some support for it. When we're talking about, you know, where they may be on the spectrum, they may be on the very, very deep end of the right side, where there's incredible amount of conflict and there's incredible amount of consequences as a result of screen use. And you may need some support around that. And you know, one this is a tool I think can be helpful for parents to have those kinds of conversations about, I know this place, for example, Chabad Lifeline supports both parents and kids, with screens. So here's a kind of 4-step thing that I think could be useful. We call it NERF. So the first one is to notice change, to express concern, to refer to support, and to follow up. So noticing the changes, like I mentioned earlier here, I noticed that we've gone into a lot more conflicts lately. I noticed the house has become really negative. And I think I want to do something about it. And then referring to support. So I know a place that might be able to support us here. Oh yeah. So one of, for example, our service is, we provide free one-on-one counseling for young adults and children, and online parent coaching from Linda. And we have a family group that's happening in October for 12 to 16-year-old kids and their parents. Is that something you might be interested in? Or it's something that I'm interested in. And then following up just to come back, because sometimes the answer is no, I think I'm okay. But if it continues to be an issue, then it's worth continuing to have the conversation with our kids about this. And
I
so
think that's the classic teenage answer. I think I'm okay.
Oh yeah.
When we were talking about, maybe we should go talk to somebody. I think I'm okay.
Yeah. I guess, at the end of the day, it's very much their choice. And I think the more we press and frame it as this is a command or something that you absolutely have to do, the more resistance we get, right? And
Yeah.
I suppose in our experience, like the more we start to kind of understand and be curious in terms of what the heck is going on here. Like,
I think the tech diet idea to at least get them to realize that there might be a problem. Once there's an acknowledgement that there is an issue, like, you know, you were saying that the junk tech and the good tech and the healthy tech, and so I think there's once there's an acknowledgement, maybe there's an opportunity.
Yeah, and yeah, those tools are there for you to perhaps use as sort of conversation starters, right? So absolutely. And so this is kind of my final plug here. Our family screen addiction program that's happening in October. So if you are interested, please don't hesitate to call or contact me, and we could get you in. So it's for children 12 to 16-year-olds, not 10 to 14. And I think that's it for my actual presentation. I left some space for any sorts of questions or comments that
I think we do have a question in the chat. I just wanted to, if you're watching the YouTube live stream or if you're in the Zoom call, please don't hesitate to pop something in the chat if you have a question or a comment. One of the questions we have, it is very difficult to manage when homework and school related things are also require Wi-Fi and screen. How to manage and discern the time without policing. How do you manage and discern the time without policing your young teen? And I could say the same thing myself. You know, the computer's there as a resource to use while they're doing their homework, but then what do we find out gets gets turned on is YouTube and whatnot. So
yeah, that's a very good question. And I suppose that sort of question of like, how do I do it without policing my teen is probably a sentiment maybe that you may feel, or that your teen may feel towards you, that, you know, every time you always question me about what I'm doing on my computer, like, and so I think one of the important things to do is to set some structure around that. So, you know, if you're going home and you're doing homework for like every hour of the day, then maybe there's a bit of some sort of conversations around expectations of how much time we should be spending on homework and whatnot, right? So, so, you know, like I said, one of the earlier tools we suggested was designating when the Wi-Fi turns on and when it turns off. So, you know, you have the Wi-Fi's turning off at 11 o'clock. And so whatever assignments or things that you have to do, I guess will need to be completed by then. And then after then, you'll have to wait until the next day to have the Wi-Fi on again. Yeah, there's a question. Some of the slides went through pretty fast. I think Daniel mentioned that this presentation will be on YouTube, so you can look at it again. Yeah. I'm not going to look at it again because I don't like listening to my own voice. Yeah.
So for those watching, you can just pop up the YouTube. It'll just re-upload itself once the stream is done, but you can go in there and pause on whatever you need to check out once you're watching the YouTube recording. Thank you. So I think that's all our questions. I'm just going to double check on the YouTube chat. We have some people watching, but there are no additional questions there. This has been in our parent conference one of our most popular talks, and we really appreciate Bill you coming here and And we hope Belinda gets a quick recovery. And you guys have been an absolute insight into the screen addiction and the whole addiction, and remind everybody that Chabad is a great resource, a counseling resource for all parents and students.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel.
So just before we head out, just a reminder that we have, maybe if Joey can get that slide back on the screen. Just a thank you to our partners. A thank you to our all the partners that made it possible to have our parent con. All the representatives from the EMSB and externally who provided some great support and great insights into many topics. Please don't hesitate to check out our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/EMSB parents, and on our website, our EMSB website, emsbparents.ca. So thank you so much. Thank you, Bill, for this enlightening talk. And I wish everybody an excellent afternoon. Thank you very much.